Today, we're talking about 8 skills that you need to master as a youth pastor.
Welcome to another episode of the Ministry Coach Podcast. My name is Jeff Lascola. This is
Kristen Lascola.
And today we're going to talk all about the multitude of skills a youth pastor needs to really perfect the art of youth ministry.
Yeah, I think there's obviously a lot of spiritual things, so don't think we're heathens or something for not bringing those up. We can do a whole other episode on the spiritual attributes. Today, we're talking more about job skills, but we obviously can't neglect the importance of our spiritual life. And we'll touch on that just a little bit. But you know, a lot of what we talk about comes with the assumption that you are growing spiritually, that you love Jesus, that your relationship with him is dynamic and growing and not stagnant. And now let's be really good at our job too. So we are most of the time coming from that like baseline assumption. I just felt like I had to say that because sometimes I listen to podcasts and people give the equivalent of like a Miss America answer because it's Christian. So we feel like there's only a spiritual answer. But this is also a leadership podcast. So the two can blend and we talk about both frequently. So number one, this is kind of like the youth pastor in a nutshell kind of thing, like the skills you want to focus on, is speaking. Obviously.
Delegate it. Just delegate it to your intern.
That is funny, but not that funny because
I tried.
Believe it or not, that this does not have to be your strongest gift. So the difference between, I think, like a youth pastor and just a speaking pastor is a speaking pastor gets to speak. And that's pretty much all they do.
Yeah.
And so that better be their A game because that's what you're getting paid to do mostly. Youth pastors do have to speak quite frequently, but they also do a lot of other things that build health into their ministry besides the weekend message. So it has to be a skill that you have, but it doesn't have to be your strongest gift. I know youth pastors that have huge youth ministries that are growing and healthy, kids that love Jesus, and speaking is one of their gifts, but not their main gift. But they have a staff of people who partner with them in speaking on the weekends also. So here's some tips though. If you want to increase your game, we could, again, do a whole episode on this, but speaking, I think, is one of those things that we can't let just, well, it's either a gift or it's not.
Right.
Somewhat, but I look back at my messages from 10 years ago and I see how far I've come. And so I know that I'm growing in that area year after year because I'm putting in the really hard work. And when I put my all into a message, like it definitely shows. With the time and with the research and the study and the prayer and the pouring over and the rehearsal and all of that. And that's usually when I'm guest speaking somewhere, you know, and so I know I can get in that zone. So some tips for that are, number one, these are things that have helped me over the years. Record your messages and listen back to them. Listen back to them? Listen to them back? I don't know.
Just listen to them again.
Yeah. And this is a cringy exercise. And for years, I couldn't bring myself to do it because I'm like, no, I already am embarrassed by myself. This will just take that even further. Like, I don't want to see myself from an outside perspective. It's too cringy.
Right.
But once I started doing it, I got a lot more comfortable with myself and was able to look at myself, I think, objectively in terms of my skills. And then even a step further, being able to share that with someone else and said, hey, what do you think? What would you have changed? What made sense to you? What was my styling like? Did it translate? Did you understand? And so that's been helpful too. Even some of my friends have come to see me speak and they'll kind of digest it with me and stuff like that. So being able to look at yourself objectively, have others who can do that with you. And then this one is huge for me, is practice before you preach. If the very first time you're saying a message is when you get up on stage, it's usually not going to be your best. As I say it out loud once, twice, 3 times, not only am I getting really comfortable with the material and able to say it like without notes and all of that, but I also realize like the styling of your communication, like what needs to be said in a certain tone of voice, or what needs to like have a lot of energy, or what is just kind of stupid. Like you put it on paper and it looks okay. And then you say it out loud and you're like, this feels a little forced or whatever.
I think a lot of times the transitions too, where in your head, when you may be writing it out, it's like, yeah, this logically goes right after this until you say it and you're like, wait, that sounds odd.
It does.
To not just jump from one thing to another and not have some sort of transition in there.
Sure. And that's like one of the hardest like fine tunes of speaking is nailing those transitions. But I think as you say it out loud and you're listening to yourself, like I kind of pace around my room and I'll say it, or driving in my car, I'll say it a couple times on my way to wherever I'm speaking, and just getting it out of my head and out in real life.
And kind of knowing ballpark how long your talk is going to go.
That's another thing too. Like I'll time it on my phone because reading through your notes is not the same as saying it. Like, oh, it took me 10 minutes to read it. It's going to take you 25 minutes to say it.
Especially if you're a bullet point type note taker, where you're just making bullet points and you're, talking on those points, and maybe you might go really long one time on a certain point, but then the next time you say it, you might not. So it's like, well, just by looking at my bullet points, I don't know if this is like a 15-minute talk or a 30-minute talk, and it kind of depends on how much I expound upon those.
Yeah, like illustration, or
and how deep do you go with those illustrations?
Yeah,
so
definitely saying it out loud, and then taking the time to study. So you want to know your material really, really well, because that gives you confidence too. So if you have a passage, read it in a few different versions, read a few different commentaries on it. What other sermons exist out there on that topic? And what is that pastor saying? And what can you pull from there? And usually my messages end up being a conglomerate picture of different voices that hopefully create one thread that is continuous. But it's like I needed all those different pictures to make this composite now that is mine. And then my own voice is what carries it down and through. But reading different articles, or I go on YouTube and sometimes I watch the Bible Project on a different thing. And, it's just like, or a podcast on the topic, whatever it might be, study, get as many voices in, and then funnel them into your voice. And then lastly, learn from speakers that you enjoy. Don't copy them. That's a big mistake, but learn from them. Meaning, well, what do you like about them? Or why are they engaging? Is it well-timed humor? Do they do great transitions? Do they, vary their energy based on what they're talking about? And is it easy to listen to? Or do they speak really fast? Like, what do you like about listening to them that keeps you engaged? And take notes on that. And then over time, you can make those things your own. But the worst is when you just try to verbatim copy someone and you just sound like a nerd, because you won't be them. It's trying to like copy someone else's handwriting. It's like, it's, forged. And then your voice can be forged, as well. So speaking is a skill youth pastors have to have. Like I said, it doesn't have to be your number one gift, but don't let it be stagnant. Make sure you're working on improving it year after year after year, because man, I think I've always had a natural public speaking gift, but the content and delivery of my messages were trash in the first few years, and it just took practice. So hang in there with that.
But it's also not to obviously discount the work of the Holy Spirit, because how many messages, I'm sure those of you listening and watching, you're like, I've had some where I walked off stage and I thought, well, that was horrible. And a student will come up and be in tears. Oh my gosh, your message impacted me so much. And then vice versa. You think, nailed it. And then nobody really says anything. And just,
I'm here for my receiving line of all the compliments, and nobody comes.
Tell me how much you enjoyed my message. No, you can just kind of tell, like no one really says anything, or maybe they say, oh, that was good or whatever. It was like, oh, I thought I really knocked that one out of the park, but I guess not. So it's, you never know what
You
the Holy
never
Spirit
know.
is working in someone's heart, and how the
Definitely.
words that that God has put on your heart to say, how that's going to impact
Well,
them.
I always take that verse, like we prepare the horse for battle. Victory is the Lord's. Like, I never want to just stand there like, Holy Spirit, do your thing,
Right.
because it's all
You
about
need
you.
to do as
It's
much
like,
as you
well,
can for
exactly.
your part.
Like, did I prepare? Did I do my diligence? Did I practice? Do I feel ready? And now I think what happens is the Holy Spirit ignites it on fire, because it's just words. I mean, when you're preaching the Bible, it's not just words. It's living and active, but I think the Holy Spirit is what like translates it to each person
Yeah.
of what they need to hear. Like those moments when you're in church and you're like,
they're
they're
speaking
talking
to me,
They know. They read my text
and
messages.
I'm in a lot of trouble.
All right. We could talk a lot about that. But number 2, a skill you must have is event planning. And sometimes, like, especially when my ministry grew, all of a sudden I'm like, am I a pastor or an event planner? Like, that's how I really felt. Like, so much of my job was planning events that it like was this weird line of like, where do I work? Like but that's the nature of being a youth pastor. We don't just like, oh, I speak and then someone else plans everything else. It's like, no, we do it all. So we all know the power of events to bring people in, to build community, to build connections with the body of Christ. And so events have a really big purpose, but we're all not gifted at them necessarily. So that's a skill. Maybe somebody that you have in your life that is really good at it. It'd be great to like maybe walk alongside them for an event.
Again,
and like
delegate.
if you have that luxury, be my guest. But most people don't have the luxury. They have to do it all. So
99% of the time it falls back on you.
yeah. And to be honest, unless that person's on staff and that's their job, it's really hard to just have a volunteer plan an event,
Can you plan our summer camp this year? It's going to be about a week long. If you can go ahead and tackle that, it'd be great.
Yeah. And I feel like each one of these could be their own episode, but good events are organized, well planned, and well prepared and fun. So having all of those in there. And we've talked a lot about the importance of working ahead and bring people in on the process. If you're like, I don't know, like ask for help until you build those skills. Like I think for me, and this could be up for debate, I like to get to the point where I'm self-sufficient. I really don't have to rely on someone else's gifts in the event planning area because I just want to be able to do it. But if you have people on your team that have the gifts and skills to be able to work with you on that, bring them. But youth ministry does center around events. So how prepared are your events? Are they thrown together at the last minute? Because I kind of have a pet peeve when youth pastors like, nobody shows up to blah, blah, blah. Like, oh, so many excuses. It's like, well, there's a lot competing for your event, right? Like sports, what's going on the weekend, slumber parties, birthday parties, whatever. And if your event is like, it cannot be missed because it's so epic every time, you'll watch your attendance go up. But I think somehow we expect like, hey, it's just all about hanging out and like, it's cool. But it's like, no, it's not. Like, not when you have so much competition. If this was 1800 and nobody had anything going on and you were the only place with electricity, then of course they would come, but it's like, no, I don't even know when electricity was invented. Does that even make sense?
Well, you'd be even more cool then.
1800. I'm sure there was electricity then. You know what I mean, though? It's like, I think we can just excuse like, oh, you're not even committed to like this ministry because you don't come to this stuff. But I mean, what's the caliber that you're giving your students? And that doesn't mean expensive, by the way. You could break even on your events if you plan it well, if you plan it in advance and all of those things. But your events should be ones that students will plan their other things around. And, not to brag, but that's kind of the point we're at with our events is like, I have parents asking me like, oh, we need to know your calendar so we can plan this and that around it because our kids don't want to miss anything you do. Our family doesn't want to miss anything you do because it's super fun every time. So get good at event planning, make that a priority. And along with that, number 3 is managing money. So managing that budget. You can do a lot. Do you want to know something crazy?
I do.
Okay. So budgets are being renewed right now. And all of my very expensive things happen at the end of the year. So it looks like on paper that I've spent no money. And I kind of haven't because I save most of my budget for the end of the year. But I think back to how many things I did this year, tons.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like I've spent like $197 or something like that, because all of the events were so well planned and so well budgeted that we broke even like every single time. And so now that I have to splurge and actually pay for prizes and buses and gifts and all this stuff, I have the money to do it. But I was running a fairly large ministry for almost an entire year on $197. So don't make it sound like you don't have enough money for nice events. Just get really good at managing your money and your budget and think of the things you want to do at the beginning of the year. We did an episode on this, and figure out where that money is going to go.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Number 4 skills you need to master is hosting, or you might call it emceeing. Being the MC. So this is a skill I think that youth pastors need to have, because you most of the time have to command the attention of a room. So whether that be on stage, or you're running a game, or you're running an event or something like that, but you need to learn how to hold the attention of the room, command a stage, be confident in a new environment, because sometimes you'll just get thrown up on stage randomly last minute. And then with that, be energetic, entertaining, and engaging. And by entertaining, I don't mean like a clown, but I do mean someone...
But not saying not a clown.
Like a clown. You can run with that wherever.
Really cut that line close.
Yeah, you could be a clown and be okay. A burping clown. That's what I like to do. I earned street cred right away. But I just go up on stage, burp the ABCs, and like... Good night, ladies and gentlemen. That's all. But yeah, I think youth pastors need to have some kind of presence on stage, not a timid, like, hi guys, I'm glad you're here, but learn how to command the stage, the room, how to engage, how to get people bought in, drawn in, to pay attention to what's going on up front. The worst thing for a program is when there's a million little different things going on in the room at the same time and there's not a central focus. It takes a really special person instead of skills to be able to focus the whole room up front. And there's some different tactics of how you can do that. I usually like to start out with a video that's short and funny, because then they're already looking at the stage and I don't have to do the like, hey, you guys, everyone be quiet. It's just like, well, the lights went down and there's a funny video. You're probably going to stop talking and look at it. Oh, the lights come on. I just happen to be here. And you're already looking up here. Fantastic. But be able to maintain that engagement, I think, is a skill that we have to have as youth pastors, and bring that confidence. Okay, number 5, relational skills. Those are very important, to be able to talk to literally anyone. And I notice, I don't think people in the real world are as friendly as pastors, because I think people always take it as like, we're friends now, right? And it's like, no, I'm just trained to be able to talk to anybody. But that's a real skill. I was at Whole Foods the other day, and this guy, this really old man, started talking to me. I don't know. And he's like, we should go on a bike ride as friends. I was like, oh, well, yeah, sure. But it was like, because we were just like had this great conversation, but I'm so used to being able to talk to anyone about anything at any time, non-discriminating. So I think that's a skill that youth pastors need to have, because you may have to talk to a parent. You may have to talk to students you don't know all the time that are brand new. You need to be able to hold a conversation. You need to be able to push through the uncomfortable. And that's a skill I learned, of just like, I feel it, I'm not acknowledging it. I feel awkward, but I can't acknowledge it, and just pretending it's not there. Be able to push through that uncomfortableness and just keep going, keep relating, keep figuring it out. Because I mean, what's the longest the conversation could last? Just hang in there for as long as you can.
Another good trick for that is, sometimes you have to think in the back of your head, this will be a really funny story later.
That's what you always say.
Yeah, when you're in those moments where you're like, I can't believe this is happening. But you can kind of just say, when I tell the story later, it's going to be awesome. And so many people can enjoy this
I'll
experience.
put this in my back pocket for my next party. Well, my friends will say that sometimes. Tell us a funny story about a junior hire, like something they did.
There we were. The lights dim.
Sour Patch Kid got thrown into my eye. True story. And then along with these relational skills, to really see people, to make people feel welcome. I think youth pastors have to be good at like, why is that kid over there by themselves? Are they new? Like, what's going on? That kid just walked away. Are they in a fight? Like being able to see the vibe of the room, what's going on, have a high EQ, just those relational skills to be able to feel what's not being said and feel dynamics. And it just takes paying attention to what's going on. Like, you know, kind of scanning of like, what are leaders doing? What's going on? Is this a new kid? Is this person upset? Does this person feel left out? And to be able to really see people and bring that relational, like architecture a little bit. You know, sometimes we'll have a new student and then I'll find like, oh, who would they fit really well with? Oh, I'm going to introduce them to these students because I think they'd fit here. And, you know, then I'm going to follow up with them after of like, hey, how'd it go? Did you have a good time? And so, you know, kind of building these behind the scenes relational structures for students. Or I'll go up to a student and be like, hey, there's someone in a purple sweater. They don't have any friends. Come and invite them to sit next to you. And then I'll like, Mufasa. And then I'll like walk away, you know? So I'm like putting these little bugs in people's ears of like how to help me create a relational structure for the room. So,
by the way, I thought it was cute that when you just spit on my microphone, you tried to catch it midair.
It was like a kitty reflex.
Nope, got me.
I'm sorry.
It's all right.
Okay. All right. Number 6, I hate this one the most, conflict skills. They suck. I mean, I guess it could go along with relational skills, but I think I learned this a long time ago. Instead of moving away from the conflict, you move toward the conflict. And that's hard
try and make people
to do.
Back down to the conflict.
Well, I think it's a learned skill to be comfortable with confrontation, and the person who can be able to listen really well and come up with solutions for peace. You know, I always think of that verse like, blessed are the peacemakers when I'm dealing with conflict, whether it's staff or students or parents or whoever's upset, to be able to really just listen, lean in, go for it, not be afraid, be brave, and come up with solutions for peace. And I think I've told you guys before, only one time in 17 years have I not been able to really solve a relational conflict problem. Every time after some listening, and I think it goes a long way when you make the first move. I've had parents say that to me before of like, I'm so glad you reached out. I'm so like, even if you kind of feel like something was left a little weird, like say like, hey, like I noticed blah, blah, blah. Is everything all right? I just wanted to check in. I think that
shows that you care.
Yeah.
And they can't sit there and say they didn't even say anything. Right. You know, like be the bigger person.
Right. Even if you aren't sure, it never hurts to ask or try. And I think people appreciate just even the thought of like, oh no, we're good, but thanks for asking, you know? So I think always making that first move. And I think that's like the leadership burden that you bear is like, well, you're in the leadership position. You should take the initiative, or you should make the first move. And I think it's also a sign of maturity. I think sometimes youth pastors can kind of be like, well, I'm not going to say anything. And if they say something, I'll solve it then. But it's like, well, no, like pursue peace, pursue the confrontation if it needs to happen in a healthy way, not like you're looking for drama. But I mean, if you know something needs to be said or cleared up or fixed or owned or apologized for, just err on the side of caution there, you know, and that helps people respect you as a leader and respect your ministry and all of that. So conflict skills, stay calm. Also, never lose your cool ever. Just, there's been times where it's like, oof, I want to say something, but you just listen, stay calm. I hear you. Yeah, that makes sense. And then asking questions is a really good tactic too, of you don't outright have to disagree, but you ask a question to kind of clarify where we're going, and realize, you and I were talking about this the other day, you don't always have to be right. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like,
A lot of it's swallowing that pride.
yeah.
And you also have to realize that probably the people that you might be getting into a conflict with, whether it's parents or friends, staff, whatever it may be, always remember, and I have to tell myself this all the time, when you think I'm right about this and I really want to make my point, is that this is probably a person that you're going to have to see a lot. And I've had many moments in my life where I think I'm so glad I didn't say what I really wanted to say, because of how my relationship with that person is now. Because if you fast forward and it's like, oh, had I said that, things would be really bad. And you don't want to be in that position. I think you should always aim to walk away from a confrontation where you think I said and did everything right, and not in like I was just and right in the, the things that I said, but more like I swallowed my pride and I aim to make the situation, I aim for peace in the situation.
For sure.
And maybe you were right. And
well, it's that verse, as long as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. So do whatever you could do. I mean, we can't control other people, obviously, but aim, like you said, aim for peace,
right.
Like at whatever that cost might be to you, whether it's pride or,
let them say the thing that they'll regret later, not you.
Yeah. Well said. All right. Number 7, vision. A youth pastor has got to have vision. And by that, I mean, where do we need to go? What's next? And who or what do we need to get there? Mm-hmm. So I think it's always just this, I kind of fault myself a little for like finding something that works and staying there, but I think I really have to challenge myself to like get like at a 30,000 foot kind of view and say like, where are we at? Where do we need to go? And what do we need to get there? Not just doing the same like hamster wheel thing every year, every week, but where do we need to challenge ourselves in a leadership way? Where do we need to challenge our students? Where do we need to challenge, our theology? Like our students, what do they need to know theologically right now? Or what event just isn't working anymore? If the energy's off, why? And what can we do? Just kind of being like a surgeon of your ministry of like what things need to be fixed or taken out or whatever it might be. But nobody's gonna like do that for you. And I think that's the hard thing with being like the buck stops here person in your ministry is like nobody's coming to be like, it's time to look at your vision. It's just like you have to be on top of like, what's next? Where do we need to go? Because like we talked in a couple episodes prior, staying relevant is very important. And so you can't always stay relevant if you're doing the same exact thing, the same exact way every single year, every single week. You have to continue to learn and grow and stay relevant, which kind of brings us to our last one. Number 8, learning and growing personally. And this is kind of where we started, and this is where we'll kind of end full circle, but asking yourself the question, am I growing as a leader? Youth pastors have to grow and change and get better personally and spiritually every year. We can't stay stagnant or we'll get passed by, we'll become irrelevant, and our ministries will be irrelevant. I feel like I keep using that word, but it's I think what happens over time if you're not actively pursuing growth. Again, growth isn't going to come find you. We have to pursue that. So what are you reading? What are you learning? How are you better at something this year than you were last year? And what do you have to show for it? I used to think this meant like, this year I'll learn how to play guitar. I thought it meant like just a like tangible skill, but not necessarily. Like, am I thinking in new ways? Do I have renewed energy for this particular project? Am I training my staff better? Like it could mean a whole lot of things, just as long as we're pursuing growth and not being just that place of complacence. I've seen some youth pastors get that look on their face of just like over it. And they're just like, I'll hold the steering wheel, but just to study this thing, I'm not gonna like figure out where we're going next. Let's just keep it steady, go straight, and I think we can all hit a season of that where we're not like super passionate doing all this stuff. But I think that can't be the point. That's not the pinnacle. Like that's not the place we reach.
To stay.
Exactly.
I try and every day outside of, obviously I have a time for reading the Bible, time for prayer, but I also try to dedicate 10 to 15 minutes every day to just invest in myself.
Yeah.
In a variety of things, whether it's a podcast or a video or a blog on something that I'm interested in, just something that I'm feeding into to try and better myself as a person, as a man of God, as a leader, all those things. But just so that not everything is just work. And also it's kind of like the in-between of your spiritual side and the practical aspects of your day-to-day work. It's almost that bridge of that investing in yourself, if that makes any sense whatsoever. It did in my mind until I said it.
I was really trying to have it make sense. I just thought maybe you were way too smart for me to understand.
Well, we'll go with that. All right. Let's do a question of the day.
Okay.
Question of the day. Holiday season's coming up. We're having a lot of Christmas songs being played. Would you rather take out the word? No, I shouldn't say take out the word. Take out the pronunciation of which of these two words? Israel.
Well, should you say the real? Do they know Israel is Israel?
I would hope they would know it's Israel. You made a trip to Israel a few years ago.
Israel.
Or Baby Jesu.
Okay, here's the weird thing. I think the listeners are going to be like, what are you talking about? Because there's only one song, one version that says Baby Jesu.
Little Drummer Boy?
It's Little Drummer Boy. Who sings it? It comes on our Christmas playlist every year.
I think it's pretty common that in that song
Baby Jesu.
Yeah. I don't think that's the only singer that does that.
Okay. I would definitely. Okay, so I feel like they say it
shall come to thee, O Israel. Israel. Baby Jesu and Israel.
I would take out Jesu.
Not take out, but put the regular pronunciation in.
Baby Jesus instead of Baby Jesu. I just feel like Baby Jesu, like, wow, that's not even close.
That sounds like what it would be if like Jesus was like a plural. Like Jesus is the person, or Jesu is like multiple.
I think it's like his rap name, like Lil Baby Jesu. Dropping like new album 2022, Jesu, something. But Israel, at least it just sounds a little more formal.
Well, I think it sounds like when you try and
make a song fit.
No. Like, well, that could be too. But when you try and say a word and it just comes out wrong, like my dad that one time where he meant to say, "Where do I stand?" but he said, "Where do I stand?" Like all of a sudden, my dad was from the South or something.
Where do I stand?
And like Israel, it's like I meant to say Israel, but I said Israel. I'm like, why did I say that?
Israel. Like maybe it just doesn't carry a note.
I'd say
maybe I can't carry a note.
Or change the lyrics to make it work. That's what I say. As opposed to just changing the pronunciation of a word.
I mean, Jesu, what is that?
Yeah.
Is that like a different language? I don't even know where it came from.
I thought that too, but the song's in English. So why would you translate Jesus to Jesu? These are the tough questions we're asking on this pod.
Like J? Why Jesu?
You guys can vote. Which version would you like to either keep or get rid of?
Also, who won in Magical or Musical Fruit?
Oh, I don't know. We didn't get enough responses, I don't think, to really make a call.
Boo. The mystery continues.
Yeah. We're going to read a review. This is from our podcast channel through Apple iTunes. Speaking of Jesu and Israel. This is from Jojo K 3426. It says, subscribe now. Lots of great tips and wisdom coming from someone who you can tell has a lot of experience and love for students. Probably talking about you.
Me.
No matter what size your church, you'll be able to find ideas that you can use in your ministry. So glad I stumbled on this podcast.
We are too.
Thank you, Jojo K.
Jojo K in the house with baby Jesus.
All right, you guys. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening. And we will see you next time.